Good morning. Welcome to the Science of Mind class here at CSLDallas. I'm Dr. Petra. Most of you must be online because we only have a few in the room. Others will be straggling in, I'm sure. It is a glorious day here in Dallas, Texas. I hope it's beautiful where you are. I know it was snowing in Colorado just the other day. So we are continuing on with the thing itself. And we're on page 30, starting with all thought is creative, this section. Now, remember that we are talking about this very strange thing that Science of Mind calls subjective mind. And there are loads of problems with both of those terms, subjective mind, mostly because it implies something that I think is very confusing. So the things that we have to remember is that, that subjective mind is a catch-all phrase that encompasses every part of the creative process that is automatic, that is not directed by a thought or an impulse. It encompasses the stuff out of which everything is made. It encompasses primarily the law of cause and effect. It's the process in which cause becomes an effect. It's the storehouse of our history and memories and patterns that are in our subconscious, both individually and collectively. And it's the creative medium through which, into which one can say the initial idea is planted to produce the result. So there is a lot that gets kind of all wrapped up in this idea of subjective mind. And what we might do is call it universal automatic consciousness. Maybe I've just renamed it. I'll have to think about that for a minute. Universal automatic consciousness. It's the consciousness that automatically works, which is different than the consciousness that says, I choose. So, all thought is creative. Oh, let's just also remind ourselves of the very last sentence of the paragraph before. The riddle is solved, and we all use the creative power of the universal mind every time we use our own mind. Every time we use our own mind. So this is where oneness comes in. We are one with the infinite, and it is a part of this automatic consciousness that we have, that we're using. It's the law that we're using. We're one on, as Ernest Holmes says, the subjective side of life. So we're not trying to get to a law. We're not trying to turn on something. It's not out there. Well, it is out there, but it's equally in here. When it's using our mind, and it's not the spiritual bypass of just saying, well, God's got it or Spirit's got it. No, we've got it when we have a thought, and then the universal creative medium has got it because it knows how to make that happen. We all use the creative power of the universal mind every time we use our own mind. And for good or for ill, for consciously aware or unconsciously aware. All right, so let's start with this idea that all thought is creative. Since this is true, it follows that we cannot say that one thought is creative while another is not. Right? Every thought sets a train in motion. However, we must say that all thought is creative according to the nature, impulse, emotion, or conviction. Notice that those are four different things, not and, but or. According to the nature, impulse, emotion, or conviction behind the thought. And one of those four things creates the mold in this thing called subjective mind, in which the idea is accepted and poured and sets power in motion in accordance with the thought, meaning in exact correspondence with the thought, which is the cause, which creates the effect. So let's stop here. According to the nature, impulse, emotion, or conviction of the thought. 4 separate things. And so what might be the nature of thought that is creative? What might be the impulse behind a thought that is creative? What about emotion? And how is that different than conviction? This, I think, is super important because we often make the mistake in thinking that we have to emotionally feel the thought that we want to create. We may, but there are other ways to create even if we don't emotionally feel the reality of the thought that we're having that we want to create. And this is, I think, incredibly, incredibly important. There are so many different ways in which we can engage in a creative thought which is planted into that creative medium, which produces an effect. So, a thought that is creative according to its nature, we would say in the science of mind, it is a thought that is utterly aligned with spiritual truth. It is a thought that is utterly aligned with spiritual truth. So the thought and the spiritual truth are of an identical nature. Do you see? This is where we think about the idea of consciousness. So we're in our prosperity month. Let's use abundance. If my thought partakes of the nature of the reality of abundance, do you see? That's its creative power. I don't have to spend a lot of time playing around with what that might look like or thinking about an end result or setting the law in motion, because the nature of the thought is abundance. So I think about paying a bill, or I think about going on a trip, or I think about something that I need or want to do. And if my thought carries the nature of abundance, that's what it's going to create. Or if my thought carries the nature of lack, not enoughness, then that's the nature of that thought. Okay, so according to the nature, according to the impulse, which in today's world, we might think about our impulse as intention, right? The movement in consciousness, the intentionality that we have behind a thought. It's one thing to think that we're going to go on a diet. It's another thing to have an intentional thought that we're only going to put in our mouth what's good for us. To have a very intentional, directional thought. That thought is creative, which is very different than, oh, I'm thinking about, maybe I have to think about what I put in my mouth. Let me think about thinking about it. Do you see how different that is, right? So the impulse, Ernest Holmes calls that elsewhere the movement in consciousness. It's a movement, right? And we make a mistake every time that we correlate thought with left brain thinking. Over and over and over and over again, I want to remind you to expand your understanding. And so the thought is that movement in consciousness that has intentionality behind it, or that has a particular nature. The third thing is the emotion. And so a lot of spiritual tools really work themselves around the imagination and the experience of an end result. You want to buy a house, walk around in the house. Feel it, experience it. You want to have a business that's successful, see your business successful, experience the activity and the enthusiasm and the excitement, and build an emotional experience, a kinesthetic and feeling tone within yourself to make it real. And the more real you make it, the more creative power it has. So now we have nature, impulse, emotion, and the third thing is conviction. And what is that conviction in but the nature of the creative process, the nature of reality? And if we have conviction in the nature of reality, then our thought, when we do affirmations or spiritual mind treatment, or we do a deliberate technology that we understand harnesses the power of the creative process, and we are convinced that it works and that we have now just used it, do you see that conviction is enough? Even if I can't feel or experience the reality of the end result. Even if I'm not 100% sure that my thought has the nature of abundance. But if I know that when I do my spiritual work and I speak the word as the creative power, if I speak the word as the essential reality of who I am, which is spirit as me, showing up, an individualized expression of the universe, and that I'm co-creating, and I'm using a deliberate word to co-create an outcome, and I'm convinced, because I've seen it before in my own life or in other people's lives, that that works, do you see that's enough? Now, what happens when we stack all those together? Power, 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 powerhouse. The more of those things we can stack together, the better. But only one of them is required. Well, let me rephrase that. All thought is creative because all thought either has a nature, an impulse, an emotion, or a conviction. So, on the other hand, I can sit in the morning and have my meditation and do a spiritual mind treatment about how peaceful and joy-filled my life is. And then I can turn on the radio on the way to work, hear the news, and spend the next 6 hours at work complaining about the state of the world and the state of the economy and the state of the nation. What do you think I've just done with my work in the morning? Right? And so all thought is creative, but it is according to the nature, impulse, emotion, or conviction behind the thought. Thought creates the mold. The creative medium accepts that mold, pours the stuff into it, and you have the effect, sets the power in motion. Ignorance of this excuses no one from its effects, for we are dealing with a law and not a whimsical fancy, nor a capricious something that might like you today and not like you tomorrow. Ignorance of this excuses no one from its effects. Well, why? Because we're already using it. We just don't know it. We just didn't know it until we started learning about the creative process. We didn't know we were using it. But this is happening from the day we were born. This is the way the universe operates. This is the nature of reality that we are exploring and discovering. So we're not starting something new. What we want to do is harness it consciously. All right. So you know what? I'm just going to stop there, because there's just a lot of good stuff to unpack in here. And then the whole next paragraph is equally as juicy, and I don't want to get into that. So let's stop there and see, what do you think about this? How do you experience the creative nature of your own thought? Do you tend to work with the nature of thought, with the impulse, with the emotion, or with conviction in your creative process? Which do you find easier to get a hold of? Which do you find a little more challenging to get a hold of? And how can we help each other in exploring this a little more? So we're going to say good morning to Ryan and to Richard and see what's going on out there and here in the room, and and start the conversation.
Well, thank you, and good morning to everybody here in the room and to everybody who's joining us all around the world on the ethers of the internet. And this is an interactive discussion, so we always encourage people to participate by sharing their experiences, comments, or questions. And for those who are here in the room, simply just raise your hand. And what is the costume you're wearing today?
Guatemala.
He's Guatemala today, everybody. So the iconic
Halloween.
Richard is dressed up for Halloween as Guatemala. It's a very beautiful shirt, and we appreciate all of you for joining us this spooky Halloween weekend. So Richard will be helping out with the microphone. Please just make sure you can say your name and have your question ready so folks online can hear you as well. And for those who are joining us here in Zoom, we love and appreciate that you're here with us. And I see that we have a question already, and Anita knows how to use that button. And the rest of you, if you'd like to have a question or comment come into the room, you can hit that raise your hand icon, and I'll call you in. And as well, for those who are on Facebook and on Zoom, you can always put your questions and comments inside of the chat, and I'll bring those into the room as well. And I do like to keep those anonymous so we can continue to have a safe container for spiritual growth. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Anita first. Anita, do you want to go and unmute yourself and join us?
Good morning, Anita.
Hey, good morning. So in answer to your question, it depends. So for example, when I lost my job in 2020 and I didn't know what income was going to supply, my housing needs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I absolutely used the power of my conviction of knowing that all of my needs are met, no matter what it is, before the need even arises. And that there is always plenty to spare and plenty to share, pressed down, good measure, and overflowing. That is my absolute conviction. And so through that entire 7 months of being unemployed, I didn't have to worry. Yeah. Because I absolutely knew that whatever I needed was going to be there. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to talk about relationships, or something like that, yeah, that might be more of an emotional thing. Yeah. Right. So those were the things that popped into my head when you asked your question this morning.
Beautiful. Thank you, Anita. And thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing the power of the conviction. I think sometimes we overlook that. We think that we have to feel it emotionally. And even when we don't feel it emotionally, even if we have a little bit of fear, we can over and over and over and over again reach for our conviction that we're supported, our conviction that we can use this creative process. And I love that your answer is, it depends. And I think that's exactly right. Because also we recognize that sometimes we're creating very specific things out of very specific intentions and impulses or very specific needs. And so we're very directive. And other times we are actually more thinking about the experience of our life as a whole. And so we might be more aligning with the nature of reality, aligning with the spiritual truths and inviting them to creatively express in our lives. That's where we get a lot more of the serendipities and even more than we possibly could have expected. And so we can have a lot of different ways of engaging with our thought in our spiritual toolkit. There's not just one way. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Anita. I really appreciate that.
All right. Looks like we have somebody here in the room. So the wonderful Guatemala is on his way to you.
Hi, I'm Willie. I had a bit of a different experience with the abundance this past week. My birthday is the end of the month, so I always get my Social Security check at the end of the month. And 2 days before it was due, I got a letter that said, "Oh, by the way, we made a mistake last year and we paid you too much, so we're taking your October payment back."
You were like, no.
Well, I was like, how can they do that? How can they just tell somebody 2 days before? What if I didn't have a job?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to work through all the way through anger and
Sure.
back to alignment.
Right.
because it just doesn't seem right
Right.
that they get to do that.
Right.
But then, on the other hand, sometimes when it seems like when I have an aha moment, when I know that something, just know suddenly that something will work, that feels more like conviction, I guess. Because I already believed that that would work. It just had to hit me.
Right. Right. Right.
And I don't work on relationships. I couldn't survive if I didn't work on relationships. But I guess those are more emotional. So, but yeah.
Good. Yeah, and that's, of course, when we need our conviction and we need our work, our practice, is when something happens and we're like, what? Richard, we have a comment over here. What just happened? My God, right? And we do have to work ourselves back into the place where we want to be. Otherwise, the anger or the fear or the sense of, oh my God, I'm not going to have enough, that becomes the creative thought. Why? Because that's the thought that actually has emotion behind it. So just because it's a relationship doesn't mean you can't use conviction around it, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't use the nature. So let's not confuse what we are being creative about with nature, impulse, emotion, and conviction. Because we might never have had a healthy relationship. We might not actually know how it feels. But if we are convinced that the creative process works, and we're going to use the creative process to build a healthy relationship, we don't actually have to have an emotional feeling of a healthy relationship. We will, in the process, grow into that because we've decided. Or we simply, as Ernest Holmes says, if you want to have love, be love. So we align with the nature of love. We walk around in the world practicing being the presence of love, and then we're not surprised when our relationships are loving. We attract loving relationships to us. Do you see? So we don't want to confuse these 4 things that he's called out with the kinds of things that we might be creating in our lives. Because emotion has to do with the intensity of our feelings. And thought is creative when it's been, especially when it's been planted in our subjective mind, our subconscious mind, with a lot of emotion. This is why trauma and the beliefs that we've created out of trauma are so powerful, because they've been lodged in consciousness with profound emotion. It's not that the events are emotional or the outcome that we now want to have has anything to do with emotion. It's the fact that the experience and the beliefs that we built around that experience had a lot of emotional content. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, a lot of negative emotional content. Anger, fear, are very powerful emotions, and they create very powerful thoughts and beliefs. And so sometimes it's challenging when, especially if we have trauma and we have very negatively charged beliefs and thoughts that are working in our subconscious mind, our subjective mind, it can be really hard to produce a positive emotional thought or a positive feeling around that same topic or in that same arena. And so sometimes it's not worth the effort, actually, because it can be very difficult. If we can get emotionally to neutral, we can now use conviction, or we can use the nature of reality, or even profound intention to create something new that's different than the outcome that we've been creating based on the trauma that was the emotional impact of those original thoughts. Did that make sense? Did I explain that in a way that made sense, right? So I don't want to couple emotionality with soft outcomes and conviction with concrete outcomes, okay? It has to do with the way in which we are engaging with our own thoughts and what kinds of thoughts we are deciding we're going to pay attention to and that we're going to engage in. So that takes us then to our next paragraph. The conscious mind is superior to the subjective and may consciously use it. Right? Those thoughts that have been subjectified, that have become beliefs that are just running in the background, right? We can override those. We can consciously override them with thoughts that have either nature, impulse, emotion, or conviction behind them. Great as the subconscious is, its tendency is set in motion by conscious thought. And in this possibility lies the path to freedom. Otherwise, we'd be stuck, right? We'd be stuck with the trauma. We'd be stuck with the way that our parents believed life was. We'd be stuck with the way that our culture believes life is. Because we would never be able to break out of it. But it is the conscious mind that can look at subconscious patterns. It can look at our life. It can look at our collective life. And it can say, I choose something different. So I'm going to use my creative power, which is all in our intentional thought, our thought that is in alignment with the nature of reality, with the nature of life, our thought that has powerful emotion behind it or deep conviction. I can consciously use that to override, and as we know from neuroplasticity, to actually rewrite what's going on back there. And so this is why we say that we use our conscious mind, and again, over and over and over and over again, I want you not to make the mistake that this is a cerebral left brain thought. Your movement in consciousness might be a flash of an image with an extraordinary feeling tone to it, and that becomes your intention. It's not about a left brain thought. It is about the conscious use of our consciousness. So the karmic law is not kismet. It is not fate, but cause and effect. Right? The thoughts are playing themselves out. The old cause that has been set in motion is playing itself out until we set a new cause in motion. So this it, which is the subconscious, which is this creative process, it is a taskmaster to the unwise and a servant to the wise. Because it's always working. Always working. And we're always engaged with it. So it's either running us or we're running it. It's either running us or we're running it. And so everything that we think about and teach in the science of mind is designed to help us move in the position of running it as opposed to it running us.
My name is Carmen. I'm so thankful to be here. Every time I come, I always get a revelation or something resonates with what what my process is or whatever. And so I'm on a journey right now, discovering who I am, letting old beliefs go and enter, start new beliefs. And listening to you this morning, it made me think my conviction is that I have regret or lost. And it made me think that, and I'm hard on myself.
Wait a
And
minute.
so
I don't think, Carmen, I caught it. Your conviction is that
it's like,
that you have,
it's more of a negative
Ah.
ending. And so I always manifest things. But I have a limit. I know that I put a limitation on it. And one thing I realized this morning is that I asked myself, why am I so hard on myself? Why do I always have this emotion of loss or failure or regret at the end? And this morning, it made me think when I had how I was raised, and me being disciplined, and that discipline of things that were said while I'm being disciplined is still playing a part of when I manifest something and it doesn't come all the way complete circle, is that those thoughts, those words interfere with me actually getting that complete manifestation.
Yes.
And so I just realized this morning that it had a lot to do with childhood, being disciplined and being hard on myself and thinking I'm a failure or I lost something or having regret because it didn't come out the way it should have. And it just dawned on me when Karen had said, I am what I am, who I am, what I am, or who I am. And it made me think, like, if I think that that I'm a failure or I have a mindset of lost, that's what I'm always going to see at the end of whatever,
Right.
Yeah,
And yes, and that's actually what. No, it's good. It's great. It's absolutely, Carmen, and you're speaking for a lot of people, right? We start down the manifestation road, but we don't realize that we have this thought that was subjectified with an enormous amount of emotion that says, I'm a failure. And so no matter how good our manifestation is, one of two things happen. One, we can't see it. And so we pick apart how it wasn't perfect. Or two, we actually self-sabotage. And the full manifestation never has an opportunity to happen because we have this thought that is so emotion-laden that I'm a failure. And whatever I get, I'm going to lose. And so what's so powerful about that is that as you are aware of those things and those things are surfacing, you can now use the creative process to directly shift those thoughts, directly undercut them, directly rewrite them in a very powerful way. And you may not be able to use emotion to do it, because the thought of I'm a failure has so much emotion to it. To get to, well, I'm always a success, right? The brain back here goes, yeah, right, ha, 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 right? Can't believe it, because yeah, I don't know, because it's just too big of a leap, and so we can't believe it. But if I can recognize that this thought, I'm a failure, is not in alignment with the nature of reality, that's what Karen was talking about, right? I'm now going to say, no, that's not the truth. I'm an individualized expression of the one, of the universe. That which is creating in the universe, I'm using to create my own life. So, no, that's not the truth. No, do you see that? These are statements of conviction regardless of whether I feel the truth. We wait to feel the truth, but our feelings are wrapped up in the untruth. And it's not and it's just too far of a leap. Sometimes I also say to people, just try to get to neutral. It doesn't matter whether I'm a success or failure. I'm just going to be me, right? That's kind of neutral. Sometimes that's a little easier place to get to. But I don't want to stop there. I want to get to having really powerful manifestations and outcomes, right? So we use, that's why I love this. This is why we take so much time parsing a sentence, right? Because we're not stuck with just, I have to feel that it's true. No, I can just be convinced that it's true. Or I can just align myself with the nature of reality because I actually know that's true, even if I don't feel it here. Needing to feel it becomes then a bit of a stumbling block. And so we can use this process to actually undercut those very thoughts that have so much baggage to them, so much emotional baggage. And over 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 again, right? That's what neuroplasticity teaches us. Neuroplasticity teaches us that by doing it over and over and over again, no, that's not the truth, this is the truth. No, that's not the truth, this is the truth. We're not giving power to that thought. We're not letting it run us, right? And we're building a new groove. We're building a new synaptic pathway, which will eventually become our go-to response. Yeah, thanks. I know you speak for a lot of people, Carmen. Thank you. Ryan, coming back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to read this cool quote, and then we'll go over here to Lynn, who has her hand raised online. This comes from our awesome Bobby.
Hey, Bobby.
We love you, Bobby. And this is a quote from Carl Jung, and it says, "Mind is often working to creatively solve problems outside of our awareness, delivering its insight through dreams or intuition. In many cases, however, we fail to harness this inner creativity because we are too busy or too caught up in our conscious thoughts, fears, and worries." I thought that was a really good way to summarize a lot of what you were saying.
Yeah,
there, too.
yes. However, our fears don't generally live in our conscious mind. Our fears generally live in that unconscious pattern. And I cannot tell you how often I have seen people confuse their fear with their intuition. They think that their fear is their intuition speaking to them. And it's not. It's actually that subconscious fear that is coming to the forefront, that is fooling us, right? And so much, and it's also a signal. It's a signal that shows us where the work is, where the work needs to be done. And our work is done with our conscious mind. And it's actually our conscious mind is the only place that can be free of fear and worry. If we are in fear and worry, our subjective mind is actually what's running in the background. So Carl Jung has a lovely, right, is great, but that comes from depth psychology and is a slightly different map about how the psyche works. And so what we want to do is harness the conscious mind to rewrite what's in the subjective mind. And we can do it, and we can prove it to ourselves over and over and over again. We can prove it to ourselves. So good, thank you. And so you said we had a comment.
Yeah, we do. Lynn, would you like to unmute yourself and join the conversation?
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, good morning. My first time with you folks.
Welcome. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you. I so appreciate your comment of take so much time parsing a sentence, because I was introduced to the science of mind after growing up in Unity in 1998, and my book is full of parsed sentences, underlined and noted. I just want to share, I've had this, this last year, I have had an experience where I can really see how my thought created the whole experience. And having been, I would say, an in-depth studier of Ernest, I always overanalyze and figure out, now I'm doing it right, But I planted these seeds that have bloomed so beautifully, but it really wasn't what I wanted.
Uh-huh.
I planted the seeds in response to angst over something I didn't have any control over
Right.
out there. I could have noticed that I have control over my reaction response, but at the time I was too irritated. And so then I did everything I could to fix it out there.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of money fixing it out there. And I'm abundant. I have the money to do this. I can do this. Now come all the way through and created such havoc because I didn't like that light bulb over there for the silliest little thing.
Right.
I love the Stoic teachings of every obstacle is a way, and
Yes.
nonviolent communication or compassionate communication. It's like, okay, where's the need? But I think I'm close to the end of this. And I think part of being in the science of mind is taking responsibility for the seed I planted and what the fruition process has been, and to not make everybody else wrong that this is what I got. So I think that this ability to get to the emotionally neutral place is what that is. This yes, okay, I get it. I get it. So I appreciate your sentence of taking time to parse the sentence. It's just beautiful. And if I never read a
Wonderful.
book, this is it.
Good. I love that. Me too. Thanks, Lynn. Well, I'm glad you found us here and that you're joining us now, because it does help us as we dive a little more deeply. What we don't want to do is we don't want our spirituality to be just a series of platitudes or nice thoughts or shorthand, shortcuts. We actually want to know what we're doing, and we want to actually know why and how it works. It's easy to do it when life is good. The question is it available to us when we either are in a crisis or we really want to move through something, grow something, make something new come about. And so it's an opportunity for us to go deeper in it each time. So I love that. Using our thought consciously to set the cause in motion is what we're talking about. If we don't, it is true that causes will continue to be set in motion, but they will rise out of the thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, and feelings that we have had in the past, over and over and over again. And so our job is to pay attention to that. And yes, those places where we have fear and worry and uncertainty and concern, those are all places that show us where we have spiritual work that's being invited. My experience is my intuition is never afraid. It's never afraid. It's always clear. There's no confusion in my intuition, and it never brings me fear. It always brings me something, do this, not I'm afraid to do that. And so these are the places when we have fear and worry and doubt, and I'm always a failure, I'm not good enough, it never works out, right? Those are the beliefs that we want to set a new cause in motion so that we can have a new effect. And I loved, Lynn, what you said, how much time we spend trying to manipulate everything out here when it's always here. It's always here. I think that was one of the most annoying revelations that I had in relationship. I spent a lot of time and many years trying to fix everybody else. And if you could just do and behave the way that I think you should do and behave, we would be happy. And it never occurred to me for the longest time that all I was getting back was a reflection of how I myself was thinking, feeling, and behaving. Oh. What an unpleasant mirror. So, right, and so it's always about taking personal responsibility. If I want something different, I have to be different, right? That's the nature and impulse. I have to be different. I have to think differently about the situation. I have to engage in it differently. I have to be different on the inside, behave differently on the outside, and it's miraculous how much more loving and sane other people are. It's truly extraordinary. And this is so important because it's taking responsibility for what's going on up here. Good. One last comment, and then we're going to wrap up.
Thank you, Willie. I remember when I've always struggled with my youngest daughter and our relationship. And when she had a baby, I knew in my mind that she would use that baby against me as a pawn in our relationship. And I decided that I wasn't going to do that, that I was just going to call her every day and ask to see the kid. No matter whether I was angry with her or not, I would just call her up and say, "Can I see Matthew today?" And what's she going to say? She's not going to be the bad guy, because she's too good for that. So she would always let me see him. She wouldn't talk to me, but she would let me see him and spend time with him. And so when over the years, all of my clients know Anne Marie. They've actually been around her because she worked in this business for a while. And so they know her. And so they would ask me about her. And I made up my mind that I was going to find one thing about Anne Marie that I could be positive about.
Yeah. Yes.
So no matter what
Yes.
anybody said to me about her, I said, but she is doing a great job as a mother.
Yes.
And I said it, and I said it,
Right.
and I said it until I believed it, and she believed it, and
Yes.
the universe believed it.
Yes.
And she will actually go to bat for him more than anybody I've ever seen go
love
to
that.
bat for a little
Right.
kid.
Right.
But it just showed me that it was my perception of her, that I
Well-
had to change my perception.
Well, or maybe more properly, you had to shift what you were focusing on.
Right, yeah.
Right? Because she may still be a difficult
She
person.
is,
Right?
she is.
So, so that was not an incorrect
No.
perception. So I want to be clear. Sometimes we think what we're doing is changing perception, and it's really not. People are who they are. They have shown us who they are. But what we've decided to do is to focus on the good and praise it,
Yeah,
as opposed to on the things that don't seem to be working.
Right.
And that changes everything, right? Because that is the impulse behind the thought. The intention, Ernest Holmes uses the word impulse, the intention behind the thought is I am going to focus on the good and I'm going to praise it. And it shifts everything. Over time, it shifts everything. Thank you, Willie. Thanks for sharing that. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you have a fabulous Halloween weekend. We will say this is our last Sunday with Reverend Karen's beautiful photographs up here. So she will be having a reception after the celebration. Just be in here and talk about her photographs if you have any questions. We'll see you in the celebration. We'll see you during the week. We want to say thank you to Julia for being here. I think we don't have any new people this morning to say hello to except for Lynn online. Lynn, we'd love to, or anybody else who's new with us online. You can always sign up on our connection card. You can do that on our website so we can stay in touch with you. And we will see you next Sunday morning, 9:15, what are we, Central Time, or 10:30 in the celebration. Bye for now.